And now, a fireside chat with Seth Dobrin, former Chief AI Officer from IBM, and 𝗂𝗵𝗄𝗏 from iMerit on the stakes are high, best practices for deploying responsible AI.
Hi, Seth. Thank you for joining us to talk about this very interesting topic of responsible AI. I'd like to kind of term it as everything you wanted to know about responsible AI, but were afraid to ask. It's a subject, I think, that inspires both curiosity and some amount of apprehension. And hopefully in these next 20 minutes, we can kind of get into the why and the how of it. So thanks for being on. Just to kick off, in your journey as a senior executive, how did you kind of come to be engaged with this subject and decide that this is the most important thing for you to be doing right now?
Yeah, no, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and be part of this conversation. As you mentioned, it's very topical at the moment, both in the tech world and in society at large. So, my journey to get here is maybe a little bit convoluted or unusual. I'm actually a human geneticist by training. I have been in the field of AI or data science or machine learning or statistics since graduate school. And over the years, I've worked in startups, academics, industry. And about 11 or 12 years ago now, I started focused on corporate transformation, leveraging AI and data to do that. And one of the biggest challenges of these kinds of digital transformations, if you will, data and AI are a big part of digital transformations, is really the trust and adoption of these tools by the people that are going to be using them and the people that are going to be impacted by them. And a big part of trust is the responsible nature of it. Is it giving the correct answer? Can I understand it? Is it transparent? Is there bias? Things like that. And then that's kind of how I got into the space and have been for a number of years. I didn't necessarily call it that, but over the last 2 or 3 years, this thread of trustworthy AI, responsible AI has come up. And it's more than just bias. It goes down to the data. It goes into consumer protections. It goes into organizational preparedness and structure and governance. And so it's a very broad, all-encompassing topic, which is what caused me to leave, IBM, having been their first global chief AI officer, to become president of a nonprofit, the Responsible AI Institute.
That's fascinating, right? I mean, we tend to think that technology comes in, it's always assumed that it's going to be net good and everyone's going to love it immediately. But it does turn out, even in our experience, that the trust, people's relationship with that technology defines its success and its failure, not necessarily a given feature or another. I mean, that's honestly been the learning of the last 20 years, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, AI has the potential to do one of two things, right? It has the potential to really enable us to make better, more fair decisions, or it has the opportunity to propagate the bad decisions and biased and racist and misogynistic and hateful decisions that humans have made in the past, because the AI itself is just math, and math is not biased. The math in this case learns its bias from the poor decisions that we've made as humans in the past, like decisions such as redlining.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of the math is not biased, but the interpretation sometimes of math and the use of statistics can reflect systemic biases.
And that's often generated by a couple things. So it's definitely generated by the underlying data. Again, decisions such as redlining, where in certain regions or certain populations were excluded from getting mortgages or being able to buy houses in certain parts of the US. And those decisions are instantiated in the data. But then you also mentioned a really important part, which is, the interpretation of that, and actually goes a level down, where the model selection can often be a source of bias or can generate bias. And then the data selection itself can often be biased. A great example of that is, image recognition and voice data. A lot of these data, the bias didn't live necessarily in the data itself. It lived in A, the labeling of the data, and B, the lack of certain populations being included. So images, people of African descent being included, people of darker, or not necessarily darker skin, because that's not always the cause, but other parts of the non-European, non-Western world populations. And similarly with voice recordings, right, where a lot of the NLP, NLG, NLU models were trained on white males from the US and from certain parts of Europe, and that's Alexa, unless has trouble hearing my wife even today, or understanding my wife unless she deepens her voice. That's a data issue.
Wow. So before we go down the bias rabbit hole, I think maybe we should step back and sort of, if you can help us define, what is responsible AI in the sense of how you're kind of operating with it in your nonprofit. What falls within it, what maybe not part of it. What are the most important pieces that we should understand when we use this umbrella term?
Yeah. So, responsible AI, for that, I'll start from the end, which is the ultimate goal is certification of AI aligned to global standards, such as ISO, IEEE, NIST, UCAS, Standard Councils of Canada, such that there is an independent assessment that you can use to validate that you are aligned to those standards. And those assessments can be used in 3 ways. One is a self-attestation, where your internal audit team, just like you would with a SOC 2, can kind of say, we are aligned to this standard using this assessment. A second party that's non-accredited can come in and validate your documentation, get your remediation steps to get ready for an audit, or not. You may decide that's as far as you need to go. And then finally, there's a third-party audit that would come in and say, yes, you meet, in this case, the responsible AI standard. So you've conformed to our assessment. And by conforming to that assessment, we are accredited or aligned to those global standards, as I mentioned, and we've certified or accredited auditors to come in and give you the RAY certification stamp. So that's kind of the end goal is this process, or this maturity, progressiveness, if you will. Now, underneath that, what is responsible AI? So responsible
what are the elements, right?
What is responsible AI? So it's bias and fairness. It's transparency and explainability. It's robustness. It's safety and security. It's organizational preparedness. So is the organization set up in a way that's aligned to that? And it's consumer protections. And so those are the 6 dimensions that we measure on. And that are important for responsible AI. So as I mentioned, it's more all-encompassing than just bias, fairness, and transparency.
Sure. And is it kind of more, does it touch at the technical level, or is it more at the policy level?
So, I mean, there are technical inputs into it. And so, part of the assessment is, do you have bias measures? Right? And do you have a methodology for explaining your models? And then you have to actually feed in some of those outputs when you get into a system level assessment, where you are saying, here are the results of our bias test, if you will. And then we also, in some of so there's 2 ways to use it. We have configured assessments, which are configured to a specific certification body or a specific use case. The most popular one these days is employment, given the New York regulation. And so then there are specific recommendations that come out, and we can actually provide recommendations for the values that would go into your bias testing. So here are the protected classes in employment you should look for. Here are the acceptable limits that you can put in for each of those protected classes. And so we actually can provide those kinds of inputs as well, and then take the output of that.
And is this, at the time of beginning the AI journey or after you developed a model?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think ideally you consider this as part of the whole process.
Okay.
But the assessment is done at the end,
Mhm.
in the way we've designed it. Now, were I using this in my organization, I would do this assessment at multiple steps to make sure my
Right.
team's not going too far down the road.
Yeah.
We're not doing this with foundational models yet, or any of these very, complex, hard to long tail training time.
Uh-huh.
I would figure out a way to do these assessments at every step
Uh-huh.
of the development of those, every iteration, because you can't go back and undo it without redoing the whole thing.
Right.
And
Once you have
so,
a trained model, it's problematic to kind of unring the bell, right?
well, so yeah, yes and no. So for smaller models, you just tune the parameters a little bit. You adjust
Right.
the, and what those parameters are that you need to hit, or those targets are you need to hit, especially for bias and fairness. So absolutely, you want to feed that in up front. You want to make sure you're training towards those. The organizational maturity needs to be there. You need to have the proper internal governance and policies. You need to make sure that your teams are aligning to those. And so, it is possible, and I would recommend that you do it as part of it's part of your system. It's again, I don't talk about AI models when I talk about responsible AI. I talk about AI systems.
Right.
Includes a couple of things. It includes the organization and the way you do it, but most problems worth solving with AI are not one model. There are multiple models that are designed to tackle different parts of the problem or different aspects of the problem. And so you need to look at these factors in the system and not necessarily in the individual models, because all your models could be okay, but when you put them together, you could derive other types of issues that don't arise on the individual models. So the AI system is a really important distinction.
Sure. I mean, I think this resonates with other initiatives. I don't think it's specific to AI. You always want to know that your technology is developed responsibly, as a kind of a superset of this. But AI has the ability to generate new judgments and actions, perhaps more powerfully than traditional software.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's. I mean, and this is how we thought about it at IBM, right? You need to think about it kind of like you think of your security and privacy by design practices,
Right.
right? Those are not
Right.
things that are done at the end. Those are things that are designed in. In fact, in IBM, and they've talked about this publicly, so I can talk about it, right? We had tech ethics by design, which is this whole concept of how do you integrate, tech ethics into your security and privacy by design practice, so that things like responsible AI, and it's bigger than responsible AI, are designed into your software, are tested and validated at different aspects,
Mm-hmm.
and aren't an afterthought. It's a forethought and first-class citizen in the design of tools and design of software.
So, at iMerit, we always perk up when we're talking about the data side of things, about the human in the loop side of things. What sort of pieces do you have on that side of the, you've spoken a lot about the models as part of the AI system. What about the human in the loop and the kind of data intelligence piece?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I talk about AI, and I've been doing this talking about this for a number of years at this point, I always talk about human-centered AI. And I don't mean human-centered in the way of software development, when you're
Uh-huh.
kind of, have a human-tested interface. What's the human-machine interaction? That's not what I mean by human-centered AI. What I mean by human-centered AI is understanding upfront what is the human problem you're trying to solve, because typically you're trying to solve human problems. Who is going to be using the AI? So who's the human that's going to be using the AI? Who's the human that's going to be impacted by it? Are they the same person? How it's going to be used. So to your human in the loop process, is it designed to automate away humans, or is it designed to augment human intelligence and help them
Mhm.
derive better outcomes? Now, both are going to happen, and we need to be honest up front with the humans, again, involved in the process, that the goal of this is to automate away this function or this activity.
That's
Because
fair.
getting back to the trust factor, they're not going to trust AI if last week you said you weren't going to automate away their job, and then this thing shows up and you were like, oh, thanks for playing. You no longer, you have to find a new role. It's more important to be very transparent with those conversations. In most cases, especially when it impacts a human's health, wealth, or livelihood, it should be to augment human intelligence. It should not be to fully automate processes. And so a good example of that is there's a lot of AI that goes into lending, right? And mortgages. I bank with, we've done all our mortgages with Quicken Loans for Rocket Mortgage now for a number of years. There's a lot of AI behind that. They make the process very easy through AI, but in the end, I'm always talking to an underwriter. That underwriter is the one that is making the decision based on information that she is given from the AI, based on all the data that I've put in.
Right. And so there's, we are also learning that person also needs a certain sensitivity, not to be, to know how to interpret the AI output, what not to be swayed by, what not to be biased by, in, not being overly kind of overwhelmed by the machine output and treating that as gospel.
So, and that's why it's important to understand who's going to be using it, because that dictates how you surface that information. And that also, what you just talked about, highlights the importance of explainability and transparency, because it's really important for an underwriter in this example to know why a decision was made, good or bad, for my mortgage in this case. What factors led to the recommendation,
right?
And then maybe even in some contexts providing what is the next best option, right? So so if you don't agree with this, what are the next two best options, so that they have something to choose from. And so, for instance, we gave this loan. You may not. The explanation could look something like this: we opted to give this loan to Seth. We'll just pretend I'm a Black woman for a second, right? Even though I'm clearly not either of those things. And despite the normal demographic tilt against giving this person a mortgage, that tilt came from this feature, which we adjusted for. And when we adjusted for it, or from this data element, when we adjusted for it, that is why she now qualifies, is because this decision historically would have been driven by some pre-existing biases in the system, right? And so giving that level of explanation, why it may not look from the data, now assuming she's not looking at me when she's making this decision, but looking at the data may not look right, but this is why this decision was made, despite what you're seeing in your normal examination of this applicant.
I like that. I mean, usually when we think of AI, we think of it as handing down one judgment. And it's interesting to think about having choices as a way to kind of give the human in the loop more comfort with what they're being asked to adjudicate. I think that's a very good suggestion.
And then also there's humans in the loop up front. And so when you think about this, so in a lot of the heavily regulated industries, when someone made a decision, so financial services, health and wealth and livelihood, right? So primarily health and wealth. So financial services and healthcare. When a person made a decision, they were often asked to explain afterwards why they made a decision. So let's just say, I'm an underwriter.
Yeah.
They're going through, they're doing an audit. Seth, why'd you make this decision?
Right.
Well, I can think about it and I can make up a reason that sounds good, whether it really is the reason or not. With AI systems, in order to implement them in these regulated industries that impact our lives, I have to validate up front. I have to be able to tell why this system is making certain decisions up front. So you're actually getting more rigorous, more forethought on these things, because I have to validate to their various financial services regulators around the world why this AI is making a decision before it ever makes a decision.
Excellent. I'm going to squeeze in an audience question because I'm also intrigued by it. The question says, what's the business case for companies to spend money and time on responsible AI? And, particularly given the current economic climate, a mentor of mine once said, it isn't real unless it's a line item on the budget.
Yep.
So how do you, what should we be looking at as a manager, as a director, as a VP, and then what's the case for it?
Yeah, so I think all AI projects should be measured on one of three metrics or multiple of these metrics. How much money is it generating for me? How much money is it saving me? Or how is it increasing the human satisfaction through the human interactions with my organization, whether they're employees or customers?
Right.
Now, why would you do, besides it's the right thing to do, why would you implement a responsible AI program? It also actually makes good business sense. BCG just published a study that showed that and surveyed businesses that do they think this is a better, you get better outcomes when you responsibly implement AI. The answer was clearly yes from AI leaders. So they evaluated kind of laggards in AI and leaders in AI. The leaders in AI always said that it's driving better business outcomes for them. It's getting higher quality software with better NPS scores. It's actually increasing their top and their bottom line metrics. And so it just makes good business sense. And it actually costs itself out where, you're seeing 15, 20% increases in bottom and top line from these organizational applications of responsible AI systems.
Right. And so if I ask the same question at the engineering level or the AI manager level, what's their kind of upside in this other than the ethical satisfaction?
So the upside is adoption, right? When I started out, when you asked me my career journey in this, right, the way I got focused on this space was the company I was at before I was at IBM. The biggest challenge for me was getting people to believe that the AI systems were A, generating a better answer, or B, generating a more reliable answer.
Right.
And back then, there were no tools for helping me explain why an AI came to a system. So I would actually have to do what I call bake-offs, right? I'd have to put the AI system against the humans and show them why the AI was better, and often have a conversation of just because you and the AI don't match doesn't mean the AI is wrong. It could be you're wrong, right? And so that transparency and that explainability and those fairness aspects are very, very important in adoption, and everyone wants what they're building to be used. And so if you want your system to be used, it's got to be explainable. It's got to be validated that it's fair.
Right.
And then probably more importantly, as we're getting in this world of regulations, if what you're building today is deemed not to be compliant with a regulation, it's going to get shut down.
Right.
Or you're going to have to spend time reworking this whole thing and redoing stuff that's just not value added and is going to demoralize your teams to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think in our experience, even before it gets to the customers, your internal sponsor, right, the person who runs the line of business, is the first person you need to convince, and they have all these same questions.
Yeah,
they're not going to unleash it in their line of business unless they're convinced about these aspects. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I guess we're at time. Maybe in a line or two, Seth, what's your manifesto?
Yeah, I mean, my manifesto is, I've said it a few times throughout the conversation, right? Whenever AI is impacting a human's health, wealth, or livelihood, it's really important to make sure that the AI is being built in a responsible way. And it's the right thing to do. It's the good human thing to do, but it also makes really, really good business sense. And having a process that allows you to evaluate through a self-attestation that your AI is in fact responsible, or through a second-party validation, or even a third-party audit, is going to lead to give you, your business, and your customers, the humans you interact with, more confidence in the AI systems that you're implementing. And let's face it, just about every system we're putting out there these days has AI in it or will have AI in it.
Great. So doing well by doing good, I think resonates with us here at iMerit. And that sums it up perfectly. Thanks a lot, Seth. Thanks for being with us today.
Yep. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Perfect. Thanks.